The Nordschleife is to racing fans, at least here in Europe, that one spot you have to go to be considered a true racing fan or a true petrol head. And since Top Gear did the Can the Diesel Jag lap the Nürburgring in 10 minutes segment and the subsequent I Do That lap time in a van challenge, the Nordschleife has become the track to have in racing video games and racing simulations. And 3 years on from its initial release, people are still asking when it's coming to Assetto Corsa Competizione. Nordschleife and GT3. Spa and GT3. The two combos you will ever need, and to get any online action in the original Assetto Corsa, that's pretty much all you're going to get, along with tourist and fun track days in Ferraris and Lambos and stuff like that. The TLDR with all of this is the Nürburgring is very popular. It's steeped in mythology and history, and since the first races were held there in 1929, it's become the ultimate test of car and driver, in the same way that the Isle of Man is for the motorbikeists. And actually, the first race in 1929 was actually a motorcycle sidecar race. The cars went there the following day. And not only was it an awe-inspiring place and somewhere that terrified the likes of Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart and their contemporaries, it was where the men were separated from the boys, and in 1968 one of the best, if often overlooked, wet weather performances was put in, when Jackie Stewart won the race at the Nürburgring by a whopping 4 minutes. I would say it was fast, it was technical, it was dangerous, but those words still ring true. And it might actually be a surprise to know that only 3 people were ever killed there as a result of a crash at a Formula 1 race weekend. There was Peter Collins, who was killed at Flansgarten in 1958, Karel de Beaufort at Bergwerk in 1964, and John Taylor at Vlugplaats in 1966. 3 drivers killed from crashes in a Formula 1 Grand Prix weekend. The total amount across all competitions is closer to 70. And the amount killed as a result of driving on a track day or the tourist and fart and layout or whatever you want to call it is even more still. The most recent was about a month ago. There have been reports of recovery teams, ambulances, marshals and so on turning up to the scene of a crash and finding stopwatches still ticking as drivers go around there in search of automotive nirvana. There are people out there that do know their way around. A lot more think they know their way around. I mean, it's a place that bites. Just watch that Auto Addiction channel. And at the risk of turning into Simon Whistler for a second, bonus fact. Jackie Stewart is severely dyslexic and developed a photographic memory because of his inability, at least by educational standards, to read and write. He knew every inch of the Nürburgring and could drive faster than most other people as a result because he knew what was coming and how that corner would be. He can still tell you every braking point, every gear change and so on. What a man. So as you can imagine, as the speeds increased in the late 1960s and into the 70s, drivers started calling on tracks to evolve with them. And as the circuit owners were responsible for the upgrades, they had to pay for those upgrades. And because they had to spend money, well, they weren't going to do it. There's actually 2 stories here. One is that Jackie Stewart had asked for some trees to be chopped down at Cops Corner at Silverstone, and upon hearing that, the clerk of the course said, if Jackie Stewart wants those trees cutting down, here's a chainsaw, he can do it himself. The other is that Jochen Rindt had gone to the Nürburgring and asked them if they'd done the upgrades that the drivers had demanded. The circuit said that it hadn't, at which point Jack Brabham said, right, we're not going. And the Nürburgring had apparently got a slightly inflated view of itself by that point, much like Spa had. They believed that the drivers would never boycott the 2 greatest racing circuits in the world. But they did. And following Niki Lauda's accident in 1976, they left completely. And the old Spa was already dead by this point, at least in Formula 1. Sports car racing continued until 70-something. But even with all of that, they never went to the extremes that they did in 2015. Because on the 28th of March that year, a photographer was killed at Vlugplaats Corner when a Nissan GTR GT3 being driven by Jan Mardenborough in a VLN race left the track after taking off, in a dose of irony given the name of that portion of the track. The car landed upside down on the other side of the catch fencing and several people were injured. Mardenborough was taken to the medical facility as a precaution, but the photographer was sadly killed. The car had basically done what had happened to Peter Dumbreck at Le Mans. The front had lost downforce while the rear still had downforce, and the car just did a backflip as it went over the hump just before that right-hander. Now normally this tragic accident will be dismissed as a tragic accident and stuff would get written online like it says so on the ticket that racing is dangerous. Play chess if you don't like it, don't put gamers in real racing cars, which Mardenborough was, he came through the Gran Turismo GT Academy thing. But until the owners of the Nürburgring could make that portion of the track safer, they decided that until they could, they'd bring in speed limits. And as you can imagine, this caused a massive outcry amongst drivers, insiders and fans. Speed limits on a racetrack. Speed limits are for the pit lanes. The Autobahn doesn't have any speed limits at all, which is actually not true, so why should the Nürburgring? They basically stuck these speed limits on the run between whatever that says and Schwedenkreuz, and again on the Döttinger Höhe between the gantry and the bridge, give or take a couple of hundred metres either side. But in both instances, the top speed was 250 km per hour. But apparently there are also speed limits here, because I don't know what that says. It goes down from 90 to 50, but reading up on it, it's apparently never enforced. At least, not anymore, but it's still there. There's also a decreasing speed limit on the entry to the tourist pits, decreasing from 130 down to 50, which I guess makes sense. And then it's apparently 50 to the bridge where people start their lap times and then de-restricted thereafter. For about 90% of the people driving there, they're never going to hit that 250 km/h limit anyway because the cars aren't powerful enough. But in the immediate aftermath of Martin's crash, the ring owners did actually enforce these speed limits, and after one driver exceeded the 250 km/h speed limit on an official track day, triggering a radar gun, they shut the track for 25 minutes, whereupon they warned everybody that the next person to break the speed limit would be ejected. So you could be forgiven for thinking, yeah, okay, on the Nordschleife, for the general public who think they're racing drivers, it's okay. The Nürburgring is just trying to protect itself in terms of this, that and the other. But there was the small matter of these speed limits also applying to the VLN race that happened in the June of that year. 24 hours of the combined Nürburgring circuit with speed limits. The authorities had actually banned GT3 racing on the Nordschleife until that point. The speed limits was the only thing they could do at such short notice to get racing back on track. No pun intended. In addition to the 250k speed limit on the Döttinger Höhe, the 200 up to Flugplatz and the 250 between Flugplatz and Schwedenkreuz, the GT3s were also given a 5% power cut to slow them down a bit, which led to some interesting discussions. As Chris Harris noted on his video of that very race, the Aston Martin GT12 would now be as fast, if not slightly faster than the GT3 down the Döttinger Höhe, because the power was about equal now, and normally GT3s would just blow on by because they were about 50 horsepower up. The worry was that it would now just be a train down the main overtaking place, and the GT3s would then start being more aggressive at other points of the track, either to make sure they got past the slower class cars before the restricted areas, or to get past other cars they were racing. One outlet described it as charge of the light brigading it, because trying to lob it inside a slower class car or another car in the same class at certain points of the track is suicide, just like the charge of the light brigade was. But at least the Nürburgring got on with making some changes to the track for the 2016 season. For the most part, it was just catch fencing of the areas I've marked on the map, purely for visual reference for you, but mostly to avoid the embarrassment of me pronouncing some of the corner names and getting lost on the track map, as I don't really know my way around without triple checking those corner names. But I do know my way around. Sort of. But crucially, there was track smoothing done at that hump leading into Flugplatz, the Quidditch hole or something, I don't know. And that smoothing of the hump was slightly controversial. No more getting light, no more thrill of getting that little bit of air, but at least the trade-off was no more speed limits. So this has been the story of the time that a track imposed speed limits on the actual track for a race. If you've learned something here today, why not give the video a like? And if you actually drove the track either as a track day, tourist day, or actually in a race like the one that Chris Harris did, I actually think Al Bunker might have been racing in that race. I probably should have asked him, but either way, like, comment, and if you're not already, get subscribed and get belled so you never miss out on a future video. Massive thanks to the people of Patreon for their continued support. If you do want to give me a monthly tip, you can do so by following the link in the description, along with vague directions to my socials and also a link to Discord. So until next time, I've been Millward. Have a great day wherever you live in the world. I'll see you all again soon for another video. So until then, bye.